Al-Alim will be our moderator, and Dr. Yamina, our resident scholar, is present as well for comments. So, inshallah, we can start whenever you're ready.
Let's say more for prayers than comments. I think we need more prayers.
That's right. That's right.
And thank you, Maha, for the welcoming. We may take it for granted, but I lived in Bloomington, Indiana, where Maha resides. And there in the mosque, Maha used to always make it like welcoming people, Jumu'ah prayer or any event. And when I was new, I realized how important it is. And eventually I realized that for lots of new people, it was very important because it gives a sense of community. And many people started also welcoming others, because sometimes you come in, no one talks to you. And that just saying the welcome is so important.
Yeah.
So thank you, Maha. I want to acknowledge and thank you for welcoming everyone all the time. Thank you.
And that's how I met Maha, was at your retreat last year. But I
Yes.
was in the masjid. I had just come and I wanted to pray 2 rakats, and I finished, and Maha was sitting kind of quite opposite me and started to talk to me. And she thought maybe I was Moroccan because I had a Moroccan jalaba on. And our whole conversation came about because she was just kind enough to say hello.
Jazakallah khair.
So let me know when you think we can begin. I'm not in a hurry. I'm yours for as long as we're here.
I'm just going to introduce you, Amina. And I also wanted to add, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome again, everyone. I love that piece about welcoming. I'm so grateful and happy to be with everyone. I felt myself so exhausted about 2 hours ago, but then I remembered it was Friday and we have this session with Sister Amina, and I found energy and excitement coming. So welcome to our second episode of understanding the nature of trauma. And again, to remind everyone, it's to find inspiration, support, and resources as we learn to gently heal. And we're gifted, truly gifted, to have Sister Amina Stevens, who generously accepted our request to share this healing series as a continuation of our October healing through Istighfar series that's on YouTube on the Receiving Nur channel. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. Sister Amina has been a practitioner and teacher in holistic wellness for over 30 years, mashallah. She brings a background rich in the tradition of Sufism and a heart that desires to serve. Again, just to remind everyone, the sessions will be posted on YouTube after the fact. And to remind everyone, remember, Sister Amina Stevens is a healer. And so this is not a traditional lecture, but a healing session. So to maximize our healing benefit, we recommend everyone intend to be physically present in our bodies in the space that we choose to be during the session, and not moving ideally too much for optimal sound quality. Or if anyone's having difficulties with sound, please trial either a set of wireless headphones or some sort of headphones to focus in on the sound, because we know Amina, mashallah, is blessed with a healing voice. We're going to have three pauses after 20 minutes, where we'll be visiting questions, comments. Feel free to post them in the chat, and feel free to join us after the 20 minutes to share your reflections and questions. With that being said, welcome, Amina.
Thank you. Thank you. Salam alaikum and Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. One of the things I'd like to share and ask if you'd be willing, So just to know that sometimes conversations around trauma can be stimulating or triggering. And that simply means that a part of us inside gets stimulated, perhaps an old memory by something that's being said. And if you have a need, you can simply unmute your button and say, we need to stop for a moment. I need to settle in my body. Or can we pause? Or put it in the chat. So this way, everybody can feel safe. I always do my best, inshallah, God knows best, to try and create a safe space for everybody. But sometimes people get stimulated, and it's then you hit that button and say, please, let's take a pause. Last week, we explored what taking a pause is about, and it's really creating a moment of safety. And it's not so much stepping out of the car and saying, I'm going to take a pause now and do a deep breath. That's step one. The second step with that would be to really pause as you take that deep breath, to stop and be present and feel your body. So what I'm going to invite us to do now is to feel where we are. And can you feel your feet? Can you feel your seat? If we can wiggle. Can you feel your seat? Can you feel your spine? And sometimes my shoulders are up here like earrings, so I have to remind myself that they can soften. And where's my jaw? Is it a little tight? Good way to unclench the jaw is just to open the mouth just a little bit until you feel the jaw release. And then you can bring the lips back together if you like. So there's lots of little ways to touch in with the body. Another way is just to notice the breathing. Just that inhalation and exhalation. And all this goes without judging yourself, without judging your body and where you think you are and where you think you need to be. It's really about just meeting yourself where you are with love or kindness or compassion. It also seems important to me to remember why we're here, because we're going to jump in deeper water tonight and explore some deeper ideas around trauma. And I think it's going to answer a number of questions that people had when they signed up for the course. And so jumping in that deep water, to keep that focus on, we mentioned last week about Rumi speaking about polishing the mirror of the heart. And in that process of polishing, whether it's through prayer, generosity, kindness, all those wonderful attributes of Allah, that sometimes we become aware of what, I'll make it a nice statement, what I've been doing to keep those qualities from coming out. And whoops, there's a little bit of anger. Maybe there's some tiredness. Maybe there's a feeling of being disconnected. And greeting even those pieces with love. They're all signs that are saying, pause. What are we here to teach you? And underneath that is this luminous being. All of us are luminous beings. And we're learning how to become who we already are, inshallah. So I was going to tell a longer story, and I'm not sure I should jump into it right now. I think that maybe I need to save it for another time. I'm going to pause and think about that as I move these papers. I guess I could tell a small piece of the story. I'm tempted. That it might be that before you were born, there was a time in that plane of light and endless light and mercy, that you may have been asked to come here. And I'm wondering if there was a moment for all of us when we bowed and said, I will. And in coming here, even though I have times of forgetfulness, lots of times of being forgetful, something in me remembers. And when I think about trauma work, ultimately it's to bring about a transformation that by the grace of God helps to transfigure the earth. So I like that story. It's a sweeter story, a little bit longer, but I like that idea. And what helps us in that process is coming together as a community. I heard something said not so long ago that the community is stronger than the will. So when we come into the masjid and our sister Maha is greeting people, greeting them like family, like brothers and sisters, it gives us that sense of support and that we're not here alone. And it also opens that door to remembrance. So I'm going to jump to, if people have pages there, I'm going to page 3. I'm going to leave out the first 2 pages right now. And this is about how the body responds to trauma. And it's really important. So I know I need to make all of these I statements, but I've got we written in here in some places. It's important to know how to name things. And so tonight we're going to be learning a little bit about the nervous system and some of its functions, how it affects us when we experience trauma, and how it supports us in moving out of trauma. So we have words and names to explain and express that. Also, when we name something, we are no longer inside of it and identified with it. Last week, I spoke about some of those feelings coming up and sitting on the shoulder like a little blackbird, not a bad bird, just a little blackbird or a little white bird. The color doesn't really matter. And those names or those, let's say those voices or feelings of fear or anger or sorrow or confusion or overwhelm. And when I can look at that little presence and identify it, that's an important piece. I go, oh, it's sadness. One of my children, and her name is sadness. When I can name that, I'm no longer inside of it. It's called differentiating. I can begin to separate out from it. So that's one of the importance in naming things that we think that we need to sometimes suppress. Naming also allows us to address secrets, and secrets tend to be places of shame around events that we've experienced or witnessed, and sometimes are afraid to talk about. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to share all my stories and my family secrets with everybody I know. But rather than keeping something here, I have my go-to person. Earlier this year, I went to see a friend of mine who is well-versed in this work, so that I had somebody who could compassionately witness some of the things that had been held inside of me. So it was important for me to have support and help me overcome a fear of naming them and to begin to heal shame. So I'm just sharing that. It may or may not be a pathway for someone else, but I see that sometimes there's importance in being able to name things. When I started to learn this trauma work, and this was not that long ago, I've had a long background in I want to say, it sounds good on the resume to say in holistic health for 30 years, but basically I'm just a curious person. And every time something attracted me, I jumped in to study it. I can't say I mastered it, but I would get excited and study something that called me to it, or it felt like it called me to it. And when I started to study this work and learn how my body functioned, it helped me understand that when I went into depression and isolation or felt panic, my body was responding to danger. That's pretty neat. My body knew what to do. It knew what to signal when I felt danger, whether the danger was real or imagined. And instead of thinking something is wrong with me, I was able to realize that my body was seeking safety. We are designed by necessity to respond to signals of danger and safety. Okay. And a lot of other things, love and companionship and connection. But at a very basic level, that makes sense to me, right? Is it safe or is it dangerous? Dogs do that. They're out, their little noses or big noses sometimes are sniffing out. Is it safe here? Who's been here? Is it dangerous? Right? Their body is asking. So we're going to learn a little bit, and not too much theory here, but it's nice to have a roadmap. So I'm going to talk about, inshallah, the autonomic nervous system. And the way I remember this name is the word autonomic sounds like automatic. So that's easy peasy, an easy way for me to remember this. And the reason is that the autonomic nervous system functions below the awareness of conscious thought. It functions automatically. So when I finish eating a meal, I don't have to tap my belly and say, okay, time to digest food, right? Don't have to do that. The autonomic nervous system takes over, and a part of that nervous system, parasympathetic and dorsal nervous systems, part of their job is to go in and digest food. Now, even though I don't have to ask the body to digest food, I'm aware that if I eat in a welcoming atmosphere, if I'm eating healthy food, that supports the digestive system. That helps it. But the body will work as it can to digest that food. Same with my heart. I don't have to say, how you doing? It's already ticking, inshallah, God willing. May it be strong forever. May your hearts be strong forever and filled with love. But I don't have to ask the heart to do that. The autonomic nervous system is making my heart work by the grace of God. By the grace of God, all comes through our sustainer who created these marvelous bodies to be able to function as they do. And I know that there's certain things that I can do to support the well-being of my heart. Yeah. So just keeping in mind that the autonomic nervous system functions below the level of conscious thinking. So the next thing we might do is think about, we could call it the ANS, autonomic nervous system. The next thing that we do is to picture it as a family tree. So any of you that have looked at a little bit of genealogy and seen family trees, you've got mom and dad and their parents and their grandparents, and then their children and the children's husbands or wives and their grandchildren and so forth. So this is not going to be that complicated. We're going to think of it as a couple of branches on a tree. So we have the autonomic nervous system, and this is really simple. It has two branches. And one branch is called the parasympathetic nervous system, and the other is the sympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic has two branches, and one's called dorsal vague. You don't have to take notes, we're not having a test, but we'll just call it dorsal or dorsal vagus, and the other one is ventral vagus. So that may sound confusing listening to this, but we're going to visit with three of these nervous systems so we can understand what happens when there's trauma. And if at some point you need a pause, I'm going to be asking for pauses because the first two are deep water. And the third nervous system is how we can get out of those states, inshallah, of depression or being activated. There's nothing wrong with either. We'll talk about that. But we don't want to stay stuck in those places for a long time. So let's go with the dorsal vagal nervous system. Whoops, excuse me. Okay, so dorsal means back. Okay, got it? There's a dorsal fin, so that can help you remember. It's that fin on the back of dolphins and other fish, right? Okay, so that's the dorsal nervous system. And it's about 5 million years old, right? So it's a pretty ancient nervous system. And if we were to think 5 million years back, we'd say, of course, animals needed to survive. So this is about 5 million years old. And we needed to, well, I don't, but animals needed to survive. Again, we're always looking for safety and is this dangerous? So the word vagus, and I'll just explain the meaning of a couple words. So if people are interested, we can do that. So the word vagus comes from a Latin word that means wandering. And this is also the 10th cranial nerve. It's the longest nerve in the body. So we can see by the names of these nervous systems, the dorsal and ventral vagus nervous system, that these come out of the vagus nerve and they have certain functions. So the dorsal vagal nervous system is activated when there's extreme danger. And what this nervous system does is it protects by shutting down body systems to conserve energy. So we might think of a possum who plays dead. Many years ago, I was coming home from work late at night on the highway, and I saw a possum in the middle of the road. And there weren't many cars, and I thought, I'm going to stop and see if this possum is okay. So I pull over on the side of the road, and I'm a little awkward. They're big animals, and I don't know if he's going to bite me, but I grab his little rat-like tail, pulled him off the road. And once I left and got in the car, he could feel the grass under him, I'm sure, and he got up and ran. So there was no sign of injury on him. I'm guessing he went out on the highway and maybe the sounds of cars or something unfamiliar under his feet or bright lights startled him and he shut down. That's the dorsal nervous system. And the reason an animal or a person shuts down, the nervous system does this automatically, is to conserve energy. So from a human perspective, when you are in that place that says, I can't do this anymore, I'm fried, I'm overwhelmed, and you just start to shut down, whether it's for 20 minutes or a longer period of time, that's dorsal coming to rescue you, right? It's shutting down. We can also think of turtles, okay? I hope Sarah's son is around. So turtles, what do they do?
Oh.
What do they do when they're traumatized? They pull their head in the shell, right? Not safe, smart turtle, they just shut the door. So that's what the dorsal nervous system does. It's a way of shutting the door. There's no more energy to cope. So I'm going to use some words that might describe dorsal. And this is where I get activated just writing and reading this sometimes. So just always look, my feet are, can I feel my feet and wiggle my toes? How's my seat? Can I move a little bit and wiggle around? If I feel myself being activated, I can shake off that energy. It sort of becomes static. It helps to move it. So like the turtle, this takes us out of connection and into isolation with stillness as a survival. We have that expression, as still as a stone. We move out of awareness and into a protective state of silence and collapse because I can't deal with it anymore. So this is amazing. It's a wonderful realization that there isn't something wrong with me. My body is protecting me. However, at some point, we will want to go back and find out what brought me to that place. That's the piece. What brought me to that place? Have my wheels been spinning? Am I overworked? Am I in an unsafe situation or some kind of situation where there's no connection, no communication? What takes me into that place of I'm done, can't do this anymore? Okay, I'm going to give some words here that might describe dorsal. One might feel frozen and numb, immobilized, collapsed, disassociated, unable to feel self-connected, isolated. So the list is coming, just hold on and breathe, along with despair, depression, feelings of hopeless, helpless, worthless, and unreachable. So those are words that some of us might use to describe dorsal. And I know that state well. I know what it's like to be in that state, right? Always thinking there's something wrong, something's not working, and not knowing how to put the puzzle pieces together. And that's why ultimately all gratitude is to God. But in his mercy, sending me wonderful teachers that helped to not just to teach this to me, but help me begin to heal. Okay. So being in dorsal may last for a few minutes, or we might live there much of the time, or someplace in between. So a simple example, we actually go out of these different states often during the day. Not everybody, but let's say, for example, you're driving down the road and you see a police light in back of you. Your heart starts to beat faster. That's going to be our next nervous system. We feel panic and pull over on the side of the street, and the police car keeps going. It wasn't about us at all. It was some story in my mind that had me feeling nervous, right? Okay, and so what can happen is we can drop into dorsal too. Dorsal might be after that happens. Maybe we've just had an incredibly long day and you need to sit there for 5 or 10 or 15 minutes and just pull it together, right? Have some self-connection before you continue down the road. Another example might be you have friends coming for dinner, and that's when you've done everything you can. You've been working for 2 days or a day, and your schedule's busy, and all of a sudden you realize you've burnt dinner. So I can attest to that one too. So you sit on the sofa about 20 minutes going, I can't take this anymore. And then you pull it together and you either make tuna fish sandwiches or order out or find a resource, find something so you're not in that state forever. In talking about trauma, I guess what I want to say is we know that people experience different types of trauma, and we never want to judge our trauma, whether it's from something that someone might say, oh, that's nothing to worry about. If it's trauma for you, if it's trauma for me, it's traumatic. We don't want to stuff that away. And we know that there's different kinds of trauma. So sometimes it can be one big incident. Though I would say in human experience, just having one big incident may happen more than once. But it may be the loss of someone we love. It may be an illness, right? It might be a child and parents are getting divorced. It can be a move to a different home. That could be traumatic for kids. Nothing's the same. So we don't want to judge what's creating trauma in the body. We're just understanding that it's there. And if I negate it, it will stay there. So we'll talk about different ways to work with this a little later. And then we have
Amina, if we may.
Yes.
Just because I know that
okay?
20-minute pause. I feel like we're good, but does anybody have any comments or questions for now? I will just say, because I know we were supposed to, this is the appropriate time for the 20-minute pause. What I really loved was mentioning how we are wired and created to seek safety and respond to any signal of danger. And it just brought to light the most beautiful realization of why the Quranic word for belief or faith is iman, which
You are freezing just a little. Yeah. You're frozen, Sarah.
In this case, why don't you go ahead, Sister Amina?
Okay. All right. So trauma can be something also that continues to occur over a period of time. Refugees are not immigrants. They are people seeking refuge. We can also have someone, reoccurring trauma. There's a woman, the late Maya Angelou, who was a mentor of sorts to many people and to Oprah. And I tried to look this up on YouTube to see if I could find her talk about this. But she said there are people that will peck at you. So sometimes a teacher might do that. A child or an adult who's experiencing constant bullying. Anybody who degrades another human being. So that can really wear away at an individual's life force. And a person might be functioning in life, but inside there's numbness. There's something that has shut down. So my little footnote here is that the autonomic nervous system is always seeking, and I know I'm repeating myself, to protect and connect. And we will be exploring resources and resiliency always, always, always with the all-compassionate, all-merciful grace of the beloved. So this is where I was thinking of taking a pause, and I'll share a story right now. So this is the first time I'm teaching this as a series of classes. When I work with people, I will share little pieces of this to give them some footing and understanding. I sit in the car. I took my flash drive to Staples to get this copied, printed out from the computer. And I came back home and I sat in the parking lot. And my way of practicing to teach is simply to sit in the car, kind of look at my notes and talk it out and hope nobody thinks, oh, she's sitting in the car talking to herself. I hope not. And right at the moment that I came to this place of pause, on my phone came the call to worship. So it made me smile about the timeliness of that, the call to worship on my phone and where I was in the text. So this is a good moment for us to wiggle a little bit, shake it out, move. You can make faces, all of those things help to move chi or ki or prana, or just energy in the body to keep it from getting stuck. So I'm looking for something here. My paper's spread out. So one of the things we're going to do later, I have an idea. We could do it now if you like, if there's no questions. I know that sound is, people are having trouble with sound. And I'm garbled at times too. Okay. I'm wondering, Sister Maha, can we hear you? What's happening?
I'm here.
Okay. Shall I keep talking?
There, Sister Hoda is gonna read us through the chat, but for right now, Sister Nora Zeki wrote, it's like a microaggression. And the other comments.
Yes, I saw it.
Okay, okay. We just want to be updated with the chat. And you were gonna, yes, Dr. Sarah will step in and do recaps when the next pause comes.
All right, wonderful. So I will just keep dancing on.
Unless unless the voices, you're unfrozen now, Sarah, if you want to do a quick recap before Sister Amina, you were going to do an exercise?
I was thinking to do an exercise just to give us a little break from this.
Excellent. So we'll have Dr. Sarah and then the exercise.
Okay.
I'm sorry, everyone. I was disconnected earlier. What I was saying was, I loved what you said, Amina, that our bodies have a strong, systematic, created need for safety. And because of that fundamental base need, any signal of some sort of danger, our bodies react. And I was saying how beautiful that is, because the Quranic word for belief or faith is iman, which has to do with safety. And I just know the speech of God is constantly calling us to the state of being, which is safety. And it's something that we get through training. And it just made sense to me that, wow, this is how we can begin to listen to our bodies, listen to these signals, and then ask, is this a true signal of danger? What is happening? And I love how you said, like, through that pause, first, deep breath. I like step one, take a deep breath. Second, check in with your body. And really, I've been trying to practice this today just because I reviewed last week's notes. Remembering that my body is just a vessel, a clay vessel, like you said last week, container, like Dr. Yamina would say, and then checking this new signal that comes in and asking myself, what is it that I feel? Am I really in danger? And then as soon as we name, like you said, there's an immediate ease that comes because it's like, okay, there's something here and it's a bird. It's not my chest. It's not my gut. It's like, it's not me. It's this, it's something that's here and I can engage with it curiously now because I've named it. I've identified it. So I love how kind of last week and this week are now building on each other. And the other thing about the dorsal vagal getting shut down, I thought that was so merciful. It's like when a kid is so cranky, he just needs a nap. If you put him in a dark space and just make the vibe calm, he will just fall asleep. And it's just so beautiful because when he wakes up, he's like a brand new human. So it's just so lovely that we have, it's just such a merciful sign that we've been embedded with this emergency backup system to shut down if things get too overwhelming so as to reset. Hopefully we don't stay there, and inshallah, I'm excited to see how we will transition together with this exercise.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I thought what we might do is a body scan. And a body scan is a kind of beginning way to practice a mindful meditation, which has been so instrumental in helping me learn how to settle in the body. And we're going to learn a little bit more later about maybe why some of us don't know how to settle. So we'll bring that into the conversation. But if we can, let's say, find a seat of dignity, and dignity doesn't mean being stiff, it means being at ease, but aware, somewhat alert. And you want to be comfortable. So whether you're sitting or standing or lying down. And what we can do is, if it feels right to you, you can close your eyes. And I mentioned last week that there are 3 different things we can do. If we don't hear well, we can simply scan the environment. Or if we do hear well, we can simply scan the environment. And I mentioned that turning the head from right to left engages the right and left hemispheres of the brain. And how we do this at the end of the salat. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Salam alaikum wa rahmatullah. And as we scan here, we might look for cues. We don't want to call it cues of safety, but what's in my nest here that feels warm and good? So I have some pictures around that I like. So you might notice what's in your sphere that feels warm and good. It might be a color, even a scent. And if you like, sometimes I like to close my eyes and just listen. What are the sounds that I hear? I'm not hearing too much tonight. But I'm listening. When I listen, I become more quiet. And so we're going to go to our bodies. We did some of this last week, just touching in with a felt sense in our body. So our body isn't just something exterior that we see in a mirror. We also have an interior. And so I'm imagining that my forehead, that sometimes gets wrinkled with worry, is relaxing, just imagining that the skin and the fascia underneath is becoming soft. Fascia is a type of connective tissue. Wraps us lovingly like a cocoon everywhere in the body. And I'm going to imagine that my brain is softening and settling on this little trampoline of connective tissue that we have in the brain. So it's relaxing. Oh, and I feel that need to take a just exhale. And I'm letting my eyes soften, even if we don't know what muscles move the eyes and where they are. Just imagine that the eyes are becoming soft and settling, sinking right in the cradle of the eye socket. So we have all these sense organs on our face, our seeing, our smelling. We can relax the skin of our cheeks. And imagine that our ears are even soft, that there's a kind of inner listening taking place, if that feels comfortable to you. And our tongue can release all need to speak in the moment and let it move away from the back of the teeth and settle. And if something doesn't feel right, don't do it. Just skip over that part. Listen to your body, to what feels right. And let's imagine our jaws are softening. And we have this throat, its expression. We express from the throat. And we can let this soften. This is a kind of super highway from the mind down into the body and into our heart center on the front of the chest. And I mentioned last week that we have a heart center on the back of the chest as well. And just notice if the shoulders need to soften. Sometimes I can wipe my arms down, shake my hands or not, or just stay quiet and imagine that any tension in my arms is running out and leaving my body through the palms of my hand. No matter where those palms are, it ends up in the earth. It's pulled in by the magnetism of the earth. And the earth can use that kind of compost. And then I let my belly soften, let my belly hang out. Our big, beautiful bellies, no matter what size they are, can rub mine. It feels good, actually, my abdomen. And I know that in my torso, I have many organs, my liver and gallbladder. In the back, there's 2 kidneys, some adrenal glands, pancreas, spleen, stomach, intestines, our reproductive organs. There's a lot happening here. And sometimes I envision them being like planets that are rub sustains in space. And I imagine that these organs are being held very gently. They're just sustained in the body. And if we have an organ that's missing, it's still there energetically. So I imagine, right, that organ is there energetically. It was part of my life. And so it still is. And you can bring your awareness down to your thighs and your knees and your legs and let any tension that's in the body run out the soles of your feet right down into the earth. And the earth accepts that. And then with a long, deep breath, I come up the back of my legs. Those muscles that move our legs on the front and back and the thighs. the back of the knee joint. And I can come up my buttocks, what I'm sitting on, come up the spine and the muscles of the back, letting each vertebra find its place of balance. And the body might want to take a long, deep breath. And as I come up to the back of my heart, resting there for a moment, my neck, I can let my head wobble just a little bit, little subtle movements, the turning. Long, deep breath. And see if you can scan your body. Is there a place there that needs your attention? You know, we have a wonderful friend. We have lots of friends in our bodies, but I feel drawn to going toward the heart. And you can greet your heart if that feels right, like an old friend. Sometimes I forget to visit my heart. And I could simply, if heart could speak to me, what would it say in this moment? Might be a word or a few words or just a feeling. What would heart say if it could speak? And we can thank whatever our experience has been. I like to soften the belly, make sure I'm in my body. And a good way to slowly open the eyes is to look down. So if we were in a big room together or a small room, we would soften our eyes and perhaps look at the floor until we're ready to look up and greet our family. So we could just stay like this the rest of the night. So
Thank you so much for sharing that, Amina. I love the words that you used. Since last week, I feel like the words that you choose are so healing, and they're so pregnant with meaning.
Thank you.
And they just strike a familiar place that strikes comfort in me, like how you said that our fascia wraps us lovingly like a cocoon. I felt safe. I felt protected.
Yeah.
And when you said our eyes soft in a cradle of an eye socket, I'm like, wow, this not, and the word cradle, I believe, is a Quranic word as well, that the earth is made like a cradle for us. And it reminded me of what you said last week, that the body is our home, and our body is living on this earth. And that connection of cradle to both my body and the earth was so beautiful to visit. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you. Alhamdulillah.
Did anyone want to share anything here? Any comments? Feel free to unmute yourselves and share how that felt for you. Or
Sister Amina, I'd like you to revisit the and remind us again of the quality of listening and what listening does. You said when we listen, something happens. Is it stops our mind chatter?
Well, for me, then again, this is my experience. I know I'm listening if I can hear a white noise because I'm one of those people that hears white noise in my head. If I don't hear it, my mind is, what happens is, let's say, if I'm sitting here, but I'm thinking about what I'm going to do after, I'm not present in my body. And so some of this is about learning. It's calling ourselves home. We're calling all these bits and pieces of ourselves that are out here. You're in the car, you're thinking about dinner and cleaning the house and all the things, whatever we have to do, going for walks. They can be good things, but we're not completely at home in the body. We're not 100% here. And I'm not 100% here. I heard recently that during the course of a day, a human being can have about 60,000 thoughts, right? I'm not always conscious of what I'm thinking. My mind can just go off in tangents. So in those moments when I remind myself, I'm able to slow it down a little bit and start feeling, what does it feel like to listen, let's say with the inner ear, not the physical inner ear. There's a part of our ear called the inner ear. But what does it like to start to come inside and listen? And it's a process. It's a tuning, like a piano tuner. I'm listening. Noticing how I'm feeling. Sometimes the words felt sense in the body. So if I said to somebody, how are you doing? And they said, I'm fine. I'm fine is a thought, in a sense. How are you feeling? If I say to my grandson, my big grandson, Darren, how you doing, Darren? He says, I'm good. Then I have to say to him, tell me what's good, right? So it's about deepening into our own feelings. How am I feeling? What am I sensing in my body? It's befriending myself and getting to know myself without judgment, getting to know, can I come back with kindness, no matter what's there, right? Coming back with kindness and finding out what's happening in here. That's when we crash and burn sometimes, when I would, because I'm not paying attention. My body might be saying, slow down, don't do so much, rest, go for a walk. So it's that slowing down. Yeah. Are there any other comments before we jump back in this deeper water here?
Maybe not really a comment, but just a clarification. And I know you've been saying both together.
Uh-huh.
So, when we want to be present in the body, from time to time you also said here. And so I personally, I understand, and that's what I'm hearing from you as well, is that to be present in the body is a way to be consciously anchored in the here and now, in the present moment, right?
Yes. Same thing.
Yeah. And when we are listening, so you said not with the inner physical ear, so you mean we're listening with the heart, because in the Quran, seeing, it says what is blind is not the physical eye, but it's the hearts that are in the chest. And then it talks about hearing and listening, and it also attributes it to the heart. It says the one that truly listens and hears is the heart. So we're talking about that inner hearing. When we make the intention, it just comes. We don't have to know all this, like, just right.
Exactly. It's developing an awareness.
Exactly.
And so for me, the weather might be different each day. Sometimes I'm more present than other times. But I use that example of training the puppy last week. So the puppy wants to get up and run, and you just train it to sit. So that's what we're doing with kindness, is training the puppy, training my busy mind to be able to calm down, to breathe, not all at once, baby steps. And then we have perhaps a moment sometimes where we get that taste of what it's like to be aware, that taste of an alignment between mind and heart and body. So thank you. Thank you.
There are some comments in
So
the
I think if we have our bathing suits on, okay. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to look here. So I'm glad people are feeling relaxed and even sleepy. That's okay. That's good. It's just checking in with our body, checking in. And Nora said, one who knows themselves knows their Lord.
So can we say that somehow the way we are wired, the way we are created, especially when it comes to when you were talking about the nervous system, which is part of the body, and how we are made to respond to our environment, whether we perceive it as safe or dangerous. It does not function through thoughts as we usually want to talk about things, but it functions through feelings. By feelings, I don't mean emotions necessarily, but primarily we're going to become aware of those feelings through sensations as physical reactions of the body, and then eventually we will know what's going on, because sometimes we're not even aware what feelings we're going through.
It's a felt sense. So that goes right in with what you said about sensation. Really learning to what I've been taught, and I'm not asking it to be true for everyone, is that the body doesn't lie. If we truly listen to it.
I agree as well. Personally, well, sometimes for people it could be they're perceiving danger when there isn't, right? And in my experience, I experienced many times the other way around. My body was telling me that there is a problem, and I didn't see anything because I was visiting my thoughts about it. And then I learned to listen to the body, and that's how I learned to heal my back pain and things, because I started listening to the body rather to what I thought about it. Because I thought like something was not important, but apparently my body was saying, no, it's affecting you more than you think.
And sometimes I'd like to add that we may have, and this gets into also some deep water later, but sometimes we might be frightened and nothing is there, but it's based on an old trauma. So there's something in us that has yet to heal. And there might be a fear. When I was a child, I had a fear I could do it. I was somewhat resilient, but that fear of coming home alone in the dark at night. And there was no reason in my life for that, but I believe it came from something else, of fear that my mother had. And we can talk about that later, how sometimes things, we're connected to our ancestors. That's a simple way to say it. But let me put these glasses on. Yeah, and I like what you're saying, Miriam, about being aware of all the pieces working together in harmony. And that's what we have the opportunity to do, particularly through our prayers, is to, we're always coming back and by the grace of God, it's retuning ourselves or letting ourselves be retuned, listening to the body, learning how to focus with kindness so that everything can come together. So what I would like to do, if I may, is jump into the sympathetic nervous system. So we just looked at dorsal, and that's that shutdown, that isolation, no more energy. And so the sympathetic nervous system, I had to teach body systems at one time lightly, so I don't know them in depth. But my way of remembering that name is we need to have sympathy for somebody who is always in that nervous system. So this nervous system is a little bit younger. It's only about 4 million years old. And the nickname for it is fight or flight. And now people add or freeze. Freeze is what happens when we've been in the sympathetic nervous system too long. We bounce into dorsal. So fight or flight means just that. Stay and fight the enemy or run. We have a choice. And sometimes we don't have a choice. It's stay and fight or get the heck out of Dodge. And sadly, this is true in in many parts of the world. There's wars and displaced people. And there's terrible truths that so many have witnessed. On another level, so that's the big one, even big earth changes that are affecting people, or COVID right now. We have another kind of war that takes place that keeps this nervous system stimulated, and I'll explain how that works. But we also have things that chase us, and that's worry. And we have reason to worry sometimes. And sometimes it's, how will I pay my bills? Will I get sick? Are my children safe? Is there enough food for this week? Will I live? And hopelessness sows the seeds of trauma. If we're unable to resolve the danger, the sympathetic nervous system becomes chronically active. And the way this happens is we have two kidneys, right? Do you know where your kids are? Your kidneys are about the size of your fist, not your neighbor's fist, but your fist. And they live just under our lowest rib, our 12th rib. And they're coated in what's politely called adipose tissue or fat tissue, which keeps it insulated, warm, keeps them warm, and also helps to protect them. Okay. On top of the kidneys, we have two little glands called the adrenal glands. So each kidney has one adrenal gland just above it. And our adrenals secrete a hormone called cortisol. So when we need energy, the adrenals get that signal, autonomic nervous system, squirt, squirt, right? I don't know that it squirts, but it secretes cortisol. And what cortisol does is the heart starts beating faster. Maybe our blood was here helping in our abdomen, helping to digest food. Now it's going to the muscles. Does that make sense? To ready us for fight or flight. So it gives us energy and strength. However, if the strength is overwhelming and ongoing, that person is going to feel activated, but then there's panic and too much energy. Life becomes chaotic and disorganized. So even though we may have escaped and survived something traumatic, if the nervous system hasn't been able to reset and settle itself, then that trauma will still exist in us. So that's a big piece. We get activated, we get chaotic and disorganized. And what it's going to do is take us into exhaustion, right? And then we go into dorsal. I don't have any more energy. So this is the second piece. These are the two pieces that are there for our survival. And I'm sure there's a lot of other pieces. We have a third piece that's going to teach us about connection and love and some fun things, some good things, some blessings. But these are the two pieces that are there for protection. So one example that comes to me would be people who are in war zones, people who are fighting war. And the words they use for this, I think in World War I, they called it, I can't think of it, shock something, but they called it battle fatigue in World War II, I believe. And with each progressing war, they have a different name, but it means the same thing. And we would recognize that as burnout. You know, people that are up fighting or trying to survive for days on end up burned out. The adrenals become overworked. The system is overworked, and that's when we want to go into collapse. And someone has asked a wonderful question about what about children? So an example with children's behaviors as well. I'm going to bring that in a little bit. So what I'll say is if we have a worried mom, we have a worried child. And that's coming up momentarily. What time is it? Oh no, it's 9:15. But I will definitely cover that because it's so important for us to understand. And I can't diagnose, I can't say this is why people are ADD or ADHD or autistic, but I think some of this idea of trauma plays into that. So some of the things that can happen when we live in this state of trauma. So if a person doesn't know how to settle in their body, and this could be a child as well, then a person can bounce back and forth from being highly activated to being burnout, highly activated, burnt out. There's no middle ground. There's no place for resource. And that's where we're going to come to in this lecture. I have a little more information, or a lot more, not a lot more, another page on the sympathetic nervous system. And then we're going to go into how we resource, how we can come out of these states. And this would be helpful for children as well. So if we can just hold space with that question, that would be super. Some symptoms of this would be digestive problems. So an example is, and I've heard clients say this, they have digestive problems, and digestion isn't just about digesting food. If we have a difficult situation in our life that we haven't processed, understood, worked with, we haven't digested it. And sometimes when that piece gets resolved, the digestive problems with food clear up. Higher blood pressure, memory and sleep issues. So those might be some of those symptoms. Someone had asked much earlier when they were signing on to the course, how do you know if you have trauma? So anytime we have symptoms in the body, it's speaking to us about something. It may not be trauma, it might be food allergies, for example, which is a form of trauma. I tend to be talking more about the emotional trauma that we experience and how to work with it, how to safely let it move through the system without going into overwhelm, because if we go into overwhelm, then we're opening the wound again. So this is very compassionate, gentle work. And we'll work we can do with ourselves and inshallah with each other. So this loop forms like a ping pong ball, back and forth. There's no mid ground or very little that allows for self-regulation and co-regulation. Co-regulation, mom holding baby, right? And if mom is calm, the baby becomes calm. That's how we learn how to self-regulate. That's it in a nutshell. If we have that nurturing and mom is settled, and for mom to feel settled, so it's not just a work for women, her people in her field, people in her family, anyone around her, her life situation, mothers need support so they can tend to that infant. And if they don't have it, it affects the infant, the people that are around the baby. And if it's affecting mom, that affects the baby. So this is how at a very young age, I've got some good information on this, how babies learn, and then our brain is formed a certain way, right? Instead of being most of the attention being on the brain stem, which is areas of survival, we have more nerve energy going to the frontal lobe, which is about being more conscious and creativity. So, okay, turtle, you can go here. So, yeah, and you know, if you had a parent, so I use my father here, and I don't always like to use him as an example because he's passed over and he loved us, and he's very dear to me. He had some deep trauma when he was a child. But the example is that if we haven't had a chance to reset the nervous system, then there's a part of us that's frozen and numb. If my father yelled at me when I was a child and there was no place to run to, and I was afraid or too small to yell or fight back, then that trauma stayed frozen inside of me. You seeing how these pieces are coming together? So we're pushing 9:30, and I hope we would get to the third piece. We'll do that next week, inshallah. I'm going to finish up. No, I won't finish yet. I have a story to read about the sympathetic nervous system. And it's from a book by Peter Levine. And I'm making a big resource list for everybody, books and authors and things you can do. So this was an excerpt from his book. And he talked about being interested, wanting to know, and this might have been in the 70s, I'm guessing. I'd have to look the date up. But not many people were talking about trauma, and he had an interest. So I think it was a psychiatrist said, take a look at this patient and see if you can do something with her. So in his books, he says, and he changed the woman's name. He said, Nancy entered my office clinging nervously to her husband's arms. She was fidgeting with his hands. He was transparently burdened by her complete dependence. I noticed how tight her neck was, pulling in like an injured turtle, while her eyes were wide with the startled look of a deer in the headlights. Her posture was stooped, conveying a pervasive sense of fear and defeat. Nancy's resting heart rate was high, about 100 beats per minute, and he could surmise that by looking at her carotid artery on her neck. Her breathing was so shallow as to seem barely able to sustain life. And all of a sudden, I've left out a little bit, Nancy says to him, help me. She's starting to collapse. And Peter said, fighting my own impending panic, I was at a loss as to what to do. She's saying, I'm dying, don't let me die. She pleaded in a small, taut voice, help me, please don't let me die. Her disturbing helplessness evoked in my subconscious an archetypal solution. So something that might not make sense to the conscious mind, but something we would say out of the blue or by the grace of God came to him. Suddenly, in my mind's eye, a dreamlike image appeared. A tiger, crouched in readiness to strike, materialized out of the far wall in the room. Okay, so just stay with me with this, please. And he commands without thinking. He just, the words come out of his mouth. Run, Nancy, a tiger's chasing you. Climb those rocks and escape. He's bewildered by his own outburst. And he gazes in amazement at Nancy's legs start to tremble and move up and down. And there's spontaneous shaking and breathing for almost an hour. And at the end of that, she said later, she experienced a feeling of peacefulness that, in her own words, held her in warm, tingling waves. Later, Nancy reported that during the session, she had seen images of herself as a 4-year-old child, struggling to escape the grasp of doctors who held her down in order to administer ether anesthesia for a tonsillectomy. Until now, she recounted, this event had been long forgotten. To my utter amazement, these unusual gyrations turned Nancy's life around. Many of her symptoms improved significantly and some disappeared altogether. The panic attack that occurred during the session was her last. And over the next 2 years until her graduation from graduate school, her chronic fatigue, migraines, and premenstrual symptoms improved dramatically. Now, having said that, my little handwritten note after that is go slowly. My teacher, Peter, didn't know what was happening. It was spontaneous, and she was a gift by God's grace to be in his life, to teach him what those frozen memories, the kind of impact a frozen memory may or may not have on our body. In her case, it was extreme. The teaching I understand now is you go very, very slowly, very slowly. I'm looking for another piece of paper. 1, 2, where did that piece go? I guess it's up here. Yes, and this relates to something that Sister Amina and we spoke about after last week's lesson. And then we're done with sympathetic unless you have questions, and we'll move on to how we can work with this next week, inshallah. So I wrote again, we go gently and not extremely in working with trauma. My teacher, Myrna Martin, may God be well pleased with her. You get there quicker if you go slower. The nervous system is resetting itself. You have to go slowly, very slowly and gently with great love and compassion. So Peter Levine also wrote in his book, I once described to Andrew Bawanali, park biologist of the Mzuzu Environmental Center in Malawi, Central Africa, the spontaneous shaking, trembling, and breathing that I and thousands of my therapy clients have exhibited in sessions as they recover from trauma. He nodded excitedly, then burst out, yes, 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 this is true. Before we release captured animals back into the wild, we try to be sure that they have done just what you have described. He looked down at the ground and then added softly, if they have not trembled and breathed that way before they are released, they will likely not survive in the wild. They will die. So that's very heavy. I'm not going to close with that. But it's an example that trauma can sometimes give us symptoms. I want to lighten this up. Sometimes give us symptoms. And working with it slowly by the grace of God, more by the grace of God than anything. We have people we can see and books that we can read, but it's so much about learning how to be present. And we are going to explore hopefully more of that. This is the two big pieces in the trauma, the ones that felt quite heavy. And next week I will talk about the mother, the father imprints. But I'm wondering if there's questions. And then I have a beautiful poem I would actually like to close with. So we're not staying in this deep water. So we have some lightness around our hearts before we go away. Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask?
Assalamu alaikum, Sisters Amina, thank you so much. Amina, sorry, this is Saira Qureshi. I am so grateful that you shared here with me what everybody has shared here about their reflections, but especially this, what you talked about, the dorsal and the biofeedback and how the body responds with chronic trauma. I just did a fellowship in 2018 and 19 at UMass Boston, where we talked about the 0 to 5-year-old and how children hold on to trauma. If family life is not okay, or if there is deprivation in the house, or if there is just lots of issues related to either just organic medical problems with little children congenitally, or there is stress from academics or parents not being happy. So I know of a case where unfortunately the child over time has had multiple nannies, now around 9-10 years of age. And you are exactly right. Like the left and right, there are food allergies, there is a fear, there is anger, there is impulse control behavior, but the child is also very sensitive. The child is also very loving and craving for love. And what happened more recently is that there was an argument between the parents, and unfortunately the food sensitivity was also a confounding factor, because he had a piece of carrot cake he shouldn't had. There was a new hamster in the house that they recently got, and the younger sister, a year younger, and this boy, he overheard the parents fighting. And so what happened was that his food allergy became almost ruled out with an ER and ENT visit as a, it's called esophageal dysphagia, because his lymph node, his esophagus swelled in such a way that he couldn't swallow anything.
Yeah.
And he got so weak that 5% of his body weight got lost in the matter of a week and a half.
Thank you.
So the point that I'm trying, yeah. So I feel that definitely if trauma is withheld with the parents and also with the little ones, we can only imagine in which ways it just disrupts and destroys the normal growth and development of a child. And then of course, in the context of Islam as good parenting and good child development, social, emotional, spiritual, psychological, all kinds of linguistic and spiritual development probably gets awry over time if that chronic stress is not taken care of and prevented and intervened. So thank you so much for sharing this.
We're going to, in the coming weeks, I have a little bit more to talk about next week, and then we're going to find ways to work with this. We're going to find things that, how we can support ourselves and each other in this process of healing. So I'm thinking that what I would like to do.
We have another question from Sister Nora that she's been holding on to.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. And yes, Sister Amina, thank you so much. My question was actually about the body scans. So let's say you do the body scan, right?
Yes.
And you said that there's a certain area that you notice needs more attention. So what do we do with that? So let's say we notice that our tummies are, like, we do the body scan very gently and we notice that our stomachs hurt. So now that you have that information, maybe I'm a little getting over, I don't know, I just want to solve it. What do we do now? Like, I just wanted to know more maybe about the body scan and like the part 2 about it.
Sometimes it's really good to work with somebody and find out if is it emotional, is it related to digestion, food sensitivity. So sometimes it's good to rule out something that might be happening to the body, but it would be good just to sit and speak and find out what's happening in that person's life. What you could do in the meantime, if it's not great pain, but it's something that's speaking to you, is have tea with it. Stay with it and ask it, feel it, just let it settle. And oftentimes in that settling, that tissue will begin to relax and open up. And there's a way, and this is down the road, so I'm kind of putting the horse before the cart, but where we can work with each other even on Zoom to support each other in healing. This comes from a body of work, of techniques that you can, I wouldn't say just techniques, it's really about being present, holding space, and knowing how to meet that person where they are. So I would say for now, as long as it's not painful, just see, can I relax that part of the body?
Thank you.
Allow this part to soften.
Yeah.
Breathe with kindness and have that cup of tea, if not literal, just be present with it.
Thank you.
It goes with what you said last week about approach it. I love the tea, have tea with it. It reminds me how it builds on last week. Like it's a bird, like approach it with gentle curiosity. Like, oh, hi, like, what are you doing here today?
Thank you. Gentle curiosity. But if it was painful, yes, I had a wonderful neighbor who was Greek and her husband was Irish, and they always had a big kettle of water on the stove every day, all the time you went there, and another pot with hot tea and endless tea bags. And she would often say, come over and have tea. But it was never really about drinking tea. It was about, let's visit. How are we doing? So it was about that we have this theme of welcoming tonight. It was about welcoming. How are you doing? So may I read a poem? And I want to, I know Alba has a question. Do I have one piece of advice when opening up trauma to a family member? That's really big. And Ken, I'm wondering if we can just hold space for this. And we're going to start working. I'm going to bring in a little bit of compassionate communication to have some skills on how to speak to other people. It's really important so that we don't make matters worse. We can be honest, but there's a way in which we can do it with compassion. So inshallah, if you're willing to hold that.
Sister Amina, before you close us with the poem, I had a question about Nancy, the story of Nancy and Peter Levine. I'm not clear as to what caused her turning point. She was trembling and telling him to please help her. Then something happened and I missed that.
So what happened was he saw that she was having a panic attack and falling apart, and he wasn't sure how to approach her and help her because he wasn't versed in trauma work. He only had an interest in it and an idea that there's a connection between trauma and some of the deeper problems people might have. And it awoke in him this archetypal image that came up the way we might all see things. Sometimes it was an image, and a tiger would be an ayah of maybe something to fear, or maybe about courage, At any rate, he just said to her without thinking about it, because if he thought about it, he would have been a good doctor and he never would have said anything. But he said, run, there's a tiger coming after you. And in that moving, she began to shake out the trauma that had been frozen in her from the age of 4, just started to leave her body. just started to flow, just started to move. The legs that couldn't run when she was 4 because she was being held down by a doctor, that trauma was frozen in her nervous system. They were holding her down. And that 4-year-old was thinking, I'm going to die. Right? Nobody explained to her what was happening. It wasn't gentle. And so that fear was frozen in her. And somehow by the grace, I'd say by the grace of God, because Peter Levine really is an elder in this work, he was able to, he learned from that, from animals, from an experience he had about how we approach trauma, how trauma has an effect on our emotional, spiritual, or mental well-being.
So he saw an image of a tiger and he told her to run. There is a tiger coming after you.
Yes.
And then what happened? She started shaking.
Shaking for a good hour and trembling, and her legs were moving. And this was becoming what had been frozen, like holding a secret in. Remember the first night we talked about the unconscious mind, holding on to things we're not aware of. Somehow this came like a great flood. And in that moment, it was expressed and expelled from her nervous system.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. There was a poem that I thought might be great to read, and it's one of my favorite ones. So next week, I'm going to talk about ventral vagal, which is what's going to get us out of sympathetic and dorsal. What is the ventral vagal, and where do we go from there? And a little bit about imprints. And one of the things that you might want to explore this week is what gives you resource. And resource is one of those words, again, that we need to name things and have words. But for me, the softer word that I might look for is what nurtures me, what gives me strength. Where do I need to go when my stomach is upset? What can I do? What do I need to do if I'm feeling overwhelmed? So you might want to create a list of those things, right? You might want to create a list of those things that support you, those ayat. And one of the things that supports me is beauty. And sometimes I find that in a poem. And this is one of my favorite ones. So I wanted to share, it's like sharing my heart, one of my favorite poems. And this is by Wendell Berry. And it's called The Peace of Wild Things. And he says, when despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought or grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. So I want to ask you, and maybe we can talk about this next week. Where is your place of beauty? Where do you go and what do you do when concern about your life and the lives of your children is there, or the planet itself? He goes into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. So where is your still water? What is the beauty? I love the line, the day blind stars waiting for their light. Those stars are inside of us. When we read something, we can often take the beauty of that, and that beauty exists in us. So I want to know if you're willing to share, bring some stories or a poem or an image or something you do when you need a resource. And the list can be great or small. And some of the things that we'll be discussing in the rest of the classes, inshallah, will be boundaries, forgiveness, if it's possible to forgive. Is it possible? Self-compassion. How do we meet ourselves when we say, I did something and I really don't feel good about that? But for tonight, we just think about that wood drake, that beautiful bird, resting in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. So I thank you all for your beauty and just spending another night with you. Yes, I will. You know what I will do is I'll write out the poem and send it to Maha, who we need to support and with our love. She and Sarah and Sister Yamina, all these sisters are tending to so much. So yes, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Amina. And by the way, Dr. Isra and Dr. Sarah will be sending the emails. So kindly share the poem with Dr. Isra and Dr. Sarah. Thank you. Sorry, Dr. Ziba, go ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to comment, Sister Amina.
Hello.
You have taught me. I wish you were my physiology teacher and my anatomy teacher during my medical school. You made it seem so easy, and you had those fish with you. Our teachers didn't teach us that way. So I was saying you are definitely a very good teacher, and inshallah, and healer as well from your voice. And alhamdulillah, we are benefiting from your presence and from your knowledge. Alhamdulillah.
From yours, from all of yours. Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Yamina.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sister Amina. May Allah bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, Amina. May Allah reward you so much. It's such a gift for everyone.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. Really, it's wonderful. I have notes here for myself, for my child, for just the whole family. So I can imagine that tree of blessings that just comes through your offering. And I just pray that you get to see abundant reward for everything, because it's a huge blessing. Thank you, everyone.
Sharing this is a blessing. It fulfills something in me. Truly.
Alhamdulillah. 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 All praise and thanks to the one who gathers us and plans and shares and inspires. I hope you guys all will join us again next Friday. Oh, next Friday we will be having a session, Maha.
I can do it the day after Thanksgiving if people are able to.
I remember, Sister Amina, you requested a break on Thanksgiving. So that will be the Thanksgiving week.
However, Sister Amina got in touch with us again and said because of the confinement, she would be available.
Let's ask folks here. I know half of the folks had to leave, but for those who are still with us, would you like to meet on Friday at 8?
Yes, inshallah. Yes, inshallah.
Yes, inshallah.
So it seems to be a yes.
So we will hopefully see each other again next Friday.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Thank you so much, dear sisters.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace and blessings be with you all.
Jazakallah khair. Amina, Sister Amina, Sarah, Jazakallah khair.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.